The lectionary writers did it to us again, didn't they? Here at the close of the Christian year, and next week beginning of the new Christian year, our lectionary writers gave us a ditty to look at and to study this morning. Not exactly what we would like to end the year with, and certainly not something we would like to begin Advent season with. But it is indeed before us. They've thrown us a text that reminds us of what lies ahead. Maybe they're taking us to Golgotha and having us look back towards Bethlehem, hoping that before we get all warm and fuzzy with the giving and getting and the singing and praising and the glitter and glitz of Christmas, that we will remember what lies ahead for this child. Maybe these lectionary people have something here that we need to really think about. Maybe they're trying to get us to look at the cruelness of the wood on that cross before we think of that nice creature in Bethlehem. Maybe they're telling us to look on that cross and see that naked man hanging there, cross-eyed in pain and suffering, before we get warm and fuzzy with the swaddling clothes of the baby in the manger. I remember many years ago, we had it was a little Mill Hill church that I pastored, and it was really all we could do to come up with this little creech thing out on the corner. We were on the corner in the Mill Hill, and we had the creech set up, and of course we had the little critters, the silhouettes of critters, and we had a floodlight on the creech. And there was Mary and Joseph, and there were the wise men on the side, and there may have been, 2 or 3 different animals. And we sang some Christmas hymns before Christmas, as we are noted to do. We sang some Christmas hymns, and this little fellow standing there, the child shall lead them. He took 2 sticks. And how he put them together, I'm not sure, but he took 2 sticks and formed a cross. And he stuck it in front of the light. And the shadow of the cross was cast on the entire creech. It was the most moving thing I've ever seen, and it was spontaneous. Maybe that's what these lectionary writers are doing. They're casting the shadow of the cross on our Christmas. Because without the cross, Christmas is just another day. It is the cross that brings Christmas into focus. Maybe that's what they're all about. I'm told that there was a man who went into this steak diner that was owned and operated by the chef. And he rushed in the door, he sat down on one of the stools at the bar, and he says, "Quick, make me 3 porterhouse steaks and do it as fast as you can. Make them all medium rare." And the chef says, You're going to eat the 3 steaks? "Yes, sir." "Hurry up, get them done, get them out here. I'm hungry." So the chef goes back to the kitchen. He prepares the 3 porterhouse steaks. He comes out, puts them on the bar, and the guy just wolfs down each one of them like there's no tomorrow. And he wipes his mouth with the napkin. And the chef says, I don't think I've ever seen anyone put away that much beef in a setting that quickly. And the man said, well, they would have done it that fast too if they had as much money as I've got. And the chef says, as much money as you've got, how much money do you have? And the man stood up and he says, $2, and he ran for the door. Did you catch the most important word in that little ditty? It's the same word that's in our text. It's if. It's a powerful little word. 2 tiny little letters, but so full of power. And it's the same in most languages that I know. Anyway, see, say, ob, s, l. It's if. And it's a tiny little word that's full of all kinds of possibility. It reminds us of alternatives, does it not? Yeah, can you imagine human history? If? Well, let's play with that just a second. If the military authorities over there on Pearl Harbor had listened to the radar people and had paid attention to their bulletins, maybe Pearl Harbor would never have taken place. If the FBI and the CIA had talked to each other and shared information about the pilots who were getting training in the United States, maybe the World Trade Center would have never taken place. If it had just rained another hour or two in Dallas, Texas on November the 22nd, 1963, the bubble top would have been on the car and there'd be no assassination. If, and our world is filled with all these accidental things that came from if. Good stuff that changed our lives radically. Accidental, what would happen if somebody had not stumbled onto the microwave? Chocolate chip cookies. Potato chips. Teflon. Velcro. And my favorite of all ifs, silly putty. It's amazing when we think about our own lives how the ifs could have changed things, especially with the guys. When we were younger, we were very susceptible to if. Somebody in our ego is just raging. If you're not a scaredy cat, you would. If you could. Yeah, if it caused us to do some things we really wouldn't want to do. If you are a real man, if you were a modern woman, if you really care about this, if you really care about that, if you really love me. If. There's regret in the word too. If I had studied harder, if I had worked harder, if I had done more, if I had loved more, then this or that may not have taken place. But if we're going to be fair with the word, we also have to remember that there are some positive sides to if. If I hadn't done this, then I wouldn't have met this, or I wouldn't have met her, or I wouldn't have met him. If this hadn't happened, I wouldn't have become that. If this hadn't happened, I wouldn't have gotten this. On and on and on. And Jesus knew this word so well. If. His ministry actually began with it. You remember the story, still water in his hair dripping with water out of the Jordan River. He goes into the wilderness for 40 days. And then, as often is, when he was at his weakest, that old tempter came, the tempter from the garden, and starts his whispering campaign, just like he did with Adam and Eve. Jesus, if you are the Son of God, turn these stones to bread. Jesus, if you are the Son of God, throw yourself down from this pinnacle. And then, whipped, you can almost hear the regret in the tempter's voice. Jesus, if you would just kneel down and worship me, I'd give you all the kingdoms of the world. But the ifs don't stop there for him. His whole ministry was filled with ifs, people challenging him with the word. If you are this, then you would do that. If you believe this, you would do that. If you did that, then you would say this. On and on it went. And then we see him, the next big scene is in the Garden of Gethsemane, where he's aching, he's torn apart, he wants to live. He doesn't want to die. He wants to share life with his disciples and his family. And he has to come to grips with the will of God. And he says, oh Lord, it's not my will, your will be done. And he becomes the king. He becomes the king when he submits himself totally, completely to the will of God. But that doesn't stop the ifing. The ifing continues. Remember, in front of Pilate, on Golgotha itself, hanging there, taunted by the people below. If you are the Son of God, come on down. If you are the Son of God, save yourself. And then the thief, he doesn't use the word, but he certainly implies it. Save yourself and us. But he wasn't there. He wasn't hanging there exhausted, broken, battered, and tattered to prove or save himself. He was there, number one, to serve the will of God, and number two, to save humanity. There was a program, I don't know if some of you remember it or not, it was called Reasonable Doubt. Anybody here remember that show? Am I the only one? Okay. I doubt it. Kidding. It was a great show, and of course, reasonable doubt is a legal term, and you attorneys know it better than I do, but it doesn't say that someone is innocent. It just says there's enough doubt there that you can't convict. And the show, one of the shows was about this attorney who was a prosecuting attorney and felt guilty for some of the things she did through the years. And so she went back looking at cases and trying to get retrials for people she thought were innocent. And there was one man who was accused of murder in prison she was working with, and they get this preliminary hearing. And in that preliminary hearing, the lead police officer testifies, and the prosecuting attorney in the case testifies, and she does her job. She picks some holes through their arguments, and after the hearing adjourns, they go outside, and they're standing outside the courtroom, and the prosecuting attorney just lays into her. Just lays into her. And when he walks away, the police officer comes up and does the same thing. I mean, he just belittles her. And they go away and they find out that this attorney, her mother had died the night before. And they come back and they say to her, if I had only known, I wouldn't have. If I had only known, I wouldn't have said. few weeks ago, I was in one of those discount department stores that has 40 cash registers and 2 people running them. And we were all trying to be patient, except this one woman. And I was right beside her, right behind her. And just as she gets to the cashier, you know what happens, the register breaks. And the little girl was trying to fix it. She looked like she was about 18, 19 years old, and she's trying to fix it. Can't get it fixed, so she calls for the supervisor to come, and the supervisor a little bit more lackadaisical than you would want. And she finally gets there, and she fixes it. And just as the supervisor walks away, she begins to check out the clothing this woman has. Breaks again. You can imagine. You could see the steam coming out of this woman's ears. And she just grabs all the clothes like this, and she takes it and she throws them in the face of this little cashier. And the cashier's just standing there. She doesn't know what to do. It's just all down, down her on the floor. And I stepped over in front of her, and I said, I want to thank you for being here. She kind of leaned back a little bit, and I said, I appreciate you. I appreciate you doing what you do. And all of a sudden, the waterworks came, and she began to cry. And it started softly, and then it got into a wail. And I'm going to fast forward. We end up over in that very uncomfortable metal bench. You know where I'm talking about, on the other side of the cash registers? Yeah, that's where we end up. We end up over there. And we're talking. And come to find out, she's a single mom. 8-month-old baby at home. The baby's sick, very sick. And she left it with her mother. And she doesn't know if the mother's going to be able to handle that, the grandmother. And she feels guilty just being away from the baby. But she was doing what she had to do. She had to earn a living. Now, I wonder if the woman that threw the clothes in her face would have done that if she had known. Do you think she would have? But it makes me think, you and I are all wounded people. We're broken. We're battered. We're tattered. We're sin sick. Now, we try to go through life as though we're not. We put on fake smiles. We try to cover it up with clothes and cars and houses and stuff, trips. But we're all wounded. What if we dealt with each other like that through our own woundedness? What if we never had to say, if I had only known? Because you and I do know. We do know how broken each other are. Do we not? What if we could dispense of the ifing? There's a story about a guru who was well respected and admired. He prayed and meditated high up in a mountain in a cave. And one day he was sitting there praying and meditating, and he opened his eyes, and right there in front of him was the abbot of a monastery many miles away. And the abbot said, I'm sorry to disturb you, but I had no other place to go. I came here to ask you a question. He said, our monastery used to be very powerful in the community, very respected. There was song in the air. Our monks were happy. The chants were long and glorious. We had visitors. We had young men standing in line to join the monastery. But through the years, all of that has died away. Nobody's joining anymore. Nobody's happy anymore. Our worship is sad and laborious. Our prayers are empty. Here's my question. Is it because of some sin? And the guru said, yes, it is. It's because of the sin of ignorance. And the abbot said, really? Explain, please. The guru said, you're ignorant of the fact that the Messiah is in your midst. The Messiah is in one of your brothers. Go find him. And the monk, the abbot, says, I'm just mystified. I'm stupefied by this. And he thanks the guru, and he gets up and he leaves. And on his way back to the monastery, he starts thinking, I can't believe the Messiah is living right there in our midst. Is it Brother Matthew? No, he never brushes his teeth. All right, is it Brother Jeremiah? No, he snores too loud. Is it Brother Stephen? Well, no, he doesn't bathe very often, and his clothes have a stench. And on he went, thinking through each one of those people, coming up with various little idiosyncrasies or flaws, cracks and crevices in their personality or in their character. But he gets back to the monastery and he says to them what the guru had said to him. The Messiah is in our midst. We got to find him. And from that moment forward, they started being kind to each other again. You know, my neighbor at the table might be the Messiah. And the one I'm standing in line with might be the Messiah. The one I'm working with in the garden might just be the Messiah. The one I'm praying with may be the Messiah. The one I'm worshiping with may be the Messiah. And little by little, the group started growing together in acts of kindness and mercy and grace. They began to support each other, encourage one another. People started lining up to get into the monastery again. Songs were being hailed through the windows and doors. You see, they discovered that the Messiah was in all of them. And they started treating each other that way. Wouldn't it be grand? Wouldn't it be grand if we would do that? Christ the King is here today, somewhere in this church. Somewhere here on the Strand. He's somewhere, maybe in our home, in our business, at our work. The Messiah is there. Find him. Seek him out. Find him in one another. And in the seeking and finding, you will become the risen Christ. Representatives of mercy and grace for each other in this community. There are no ifs for us. For you and I know we've tasted the grace that eradicates all the ifs. Amen.